So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this Slim webinar on everyday advocacy for busy librarians. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen and I'll give you an overview of where we are going. So we will share and share the screen. And here we go. So everyday advocacy for busy librarians, and I will explain more of this as we go along. A couple more people just coming in. So, and I seem not to, there we go. So here's an overview of what I hope to cover today. So first of all, I want to talk about why this matters, why everyday advocacy for busy librarians matters. I'm going to talk a little bit about why me, so I will introduce myself at that point. I'm then going to ask, what is library advocacy? And then I'm going to talk about everyday advocacy as opposed to crisis advocacy, and you'll understand that when I get there. Then I'm going to talk about best practices for everyday advocacy, and then I'm going to talk about next steps. So that's what I hope to cover in this afternoon's presentation, and I just realized I did not turn on my timer, so let me do that quickly so that I don't talk throughout the entire night. So why does this matter? Well, the first reason is because the libraries matter. And if we think about it, libraries provide educational resources for all. We're the only people responsible for birth through kindergarten. We're the only people really responsible for everybody beyond 12th grade. And we're certainly responsible for everybody beyond college to end of life. So if you start thinking about libraries in that way, we are responsible for providing service to the entire population for the majority of their lives. That makes us important. Now, libraries support their communities. We support business development. We support individuals. We help each person reach their full potential through the provision of accurate and unbiased information. And those two words are very important. Accurate and unbiased. But let's keep that in our minds. Libraries matter. And because libraries matter, we have to be in a position to advocate for them. Now, everything to do with advocacy, I would maintain, is based on what I like to call the library assumptions. And we all, as librarians, assume that everybody knows what a library is, everybody knows what a librarian does, and everybody understands the value a library brings to its community. Now, that is not so. Well, it's maybe so. It's maybe so. Everybody knows that a library is a building with books, that a librarian stamps books and reads all day, and that the library is a nice thing to have. But very few people can tell you what a library really is, what a librarian actually does, and the real value a library brings to its community. Now, I was reminded of this just on Friday. I did an event for a foundation where we were meeting with all the trustees in sort of a speed dating format. And the questions that people were asking me about our library program here in Emporia completely affirmed for me that very few of them had a good handle on what a library really is, what a librarian does, or the value a library brings to its community. So hang on to those three assumptions, because those are the things that I think we have to address in any part of our library advocacy. Now, why me? Why does this affect me? Well, I'm Andrew Smith. Hello, everybody. I'm an associate professor in the School of Library and Information Management in SLIM in Emporia. And we're situated in rural Kansas, which gives us some insights into certain areas and some lesser insights into others. I currently teach library advocacy. It's one of the things I'm passionate about. I teach research, collection development, and management. I teach international librarianship, indexing, and genealogy. A wide variety of things. I'm a former board member and board chair at the Emporia Public Library. I served there for 6 years, so I have some ideas from the board side, from the chair side of what's going on. I also happen to be a visiting professor at the University of Belgrade in Serbia and with the European Centre for Peace and Development, which is a division of the United Nations University for Peace. So libraries are important to me, which means that library advocacy is important to me. So where do we go from here? What is library advocacy? So I would suggest that any good library advocacy program educates on what a library really is. And I would suggest my 5-word definition is we're bringing people and information together. The value of a library to its community, the need for unbiased, independent information sources, and the benefits of trained information professionals. That would be you as librarians, trained information professionals. So this is what library advocacy should be doing. Now, concentrate when you're thinking about educating people on these 3 things. You need to concentrate on why the library is different. And I want to emphasize this because I so often hear people describe the library and they will say something along the lines of, oh, we provide leisure reading, we provide movies and books, and we provide a meeting space. Well, here's the problem with that. Bookshops sell fiction. But why is the library different? Streaming services provide movies. But why is the library different? Search engines provide information. But why is the library different? And finally, coffee shops and rec centers provide community spaces. But why is the library different? The library is different, but we need to be able to articulate that before we start really advocating for the library. It's something different. The library is unique. It is not simply the same as these other things. Everything else here is cheaper to provide. So why do we need libraries? Now, I want to contrast what I would call everyday advocacy from what I would term crisis advocacy. And so I would define crisis advocacy as a response to a singular threat. Someone has threatened to cut your budget. Someone is trying to censor every book in your collection. Now, it's not that these are not real problems. They are real problems. But we are, I think, traditionally have tended to focus on those to the exclusion of everyday advocacy. So crisis advocacy tends to be an isolated activity. It's focused on averting one negative event. It usually happens in a short time frame, often with no notice, and an immediate response is required. Somebody sends you an email saying the legislature is going to vote to defund all the libraries. Write to your senator right now. And it's not that we shouldn't be writing, but everything is short-term, it's panicked. We have that kind of tension going on. In contrast to that, everyday advocacy, I would maintain, is a program of education and involvement. And it addresses the library assumptions, and it educates all stakeholders in the library. I'm going to talk about stakeholders a little bit later on. Everyday advocacy includes many overlapping and continuous activities. There are multiple opportunities for advocacy. It takes place in a planned time frame. It is a long-term strategy. So there is no panic, and we use time as we have it available. Now, fine, you say, but what does that mean? What does that look like? So here are what I would suggest are some best practices for everyday advocacy. I'm going to give you a list, and then I'm going to talk about each one in turn. So the first thing is to develop some sort of advocacy plan. Know what you're trying to do and how you're going to do it. The second thing, create a stakeholder list. And a stakeholder is someone who has a vested interest in the success of your library. The next thing, develop an elevator speech. You need to be able to say something positive about the library at the drop of a hat. But you need to be able to communicate a lot of information in a very short period of time. That would be your elevator speech. You need to be visible outside the library building. Very important. You need to talk about the library everywhere and all the time. You need to equip your staff to become everyday advocates. You need to equip your board as everyday advocates. And you need to include an advocacy activity every single day. Every single day, you are performing an advocacy activity. Now, don't worry, I'm going to tell you how to do this. So let's start off with a plan. Now, the very first thing is you need to budget some time. But before you think, I'm overwhelmed, I don't have time to do this, start small. Budget 5 minutes a day. Think about attorneys for a second. Attorneys bill in 6-minute increments. So they are suggesting that in 6 minutes, they are accomplishing something meaningful for you, and in multiples of 6 minutes. So do not be scornful of 5 minutes set aside to do something. If you can set aside 5 minutes a day and concentrate on advocacy activities for those 5 minutes, you're going to be further ahead than you were. So even in the busiest schedule, you can find 5 minutes. And I would put that on your calendar. Don't assume you will do it. Put it on your calendar and make it happen. So budget some time. Now, how do you develop a plan? Well, write down some advocacy goals. What would you like to achieve? What are you shooting for? Next, write down some action steps. I see where my goal is. How might I get there? Now, all of this, keep it simple and straightforward. Don't try to get too big, too grand, too complex, or too overly involved. Remember, I said this is advocacy for busy librarians. The simpler and more direct you can keep it, the easier it will be for you to accomplish in a busy schedule. So keep it simple and straightforward. Do not be scared to start small and build gradually. You do not have to email the entire US Senate or Congress every day from now till the end of time. You can start with one person, one email to one person. That is a start, and it's moving you forward. It's maybe you're not a congressperson or a senator. Maybe you're emailing the mayor. Fine, but do a small step and just keep moving with small steps. Remember, every journey begins with one step, or as somebody said, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's simplistic advice, but it's very sound advice. So do not neglect the simple and straightforward. The next thing when you're thinking about an advocacy plan is educate yourself on some advocacy resources. And ALA is an excellent place. It's all online. If you go to ALA, type in the word advocacy, lots of good things will pop up. I refer to some later at the end, but there are toolkits, there's training, there's all kinds of things that you can access. Use those, learn from other people's experience. So that's the first thing. Think about creating some sort of plan. Once you have some sort of plan, then the next thing I would suggest you do is create a stakeholder list. Now, a stakeholder list is perfectly straightforward. It is simply a list of all the library stakeholders. Now, the point is, most of the time, we're not thinking broadly enough. We include the usual folk. We include patrons. We include the board. We include the staff. Occasionally, people remember to include people giving you the money. They're all indeed library stakeholders. But there are more stakeholders in your library. The city council is a stakeholder in your library. The school board is a stakeholder in your library. Parents, students, business leaders, employers, civic organizations, federal legislatures, all these people are stakeholders in your library. Their continued good works and growth are dependent on vibrant communities, and vibrant communities are dependent on libraries. I would say to you, ask why someone is not a stakeholder in your library and try to figure out if there's a reason why somebody is not a stakeholder. And if you can't think of a reason why they're not a stakeholder, guess what? They are a stakeholder in your library. And so pretty soon you start realizing that your stakeholder list is big. Now, it's not wrong to prioritize it. It's never wrong to make sure you're paying a lot of attention to the folks who are giving you money. But understand that the stakeholders are not simply the board, the staff, or the funders. The stakeholder group is huge. It is, in fact, your entire community. But a lot of the time, you're going to have to educate people that they are stakeholders in the library. And how are you going to do that? By telling them what the library really is, by telling them what librarians do and the value of the library to their community. Now, when you're doing your stakeholder list, don't just create a static list. Create something that is useful to you. I would include email addresses if you can, because then if you need to email people, if indeed there is some legislation coming down where you want to mobilize people, you already have a list of people you can email and say, this is happening, here's what the effect it would have on the library. But make the list easy to use and easy to update. It's something you want to keep to use as much as possible. So that's your stakeholder list. Now, what about your elevator speech? We're librarians, we tend not to want to talk, but it is really important that you are able to tell people in 40 seconds or less what is important about the library. Excuse me. I usually ask my students, what is important about the library that we share? And remember back to my slide where I said, why is the library different? So don't just tell me what the library provides in language that is the same as many other things in your community. Tell me what the library provides that is different from a bookshop, that is different from a coffee shop, that is different from the streaming service, and that is different from a search engine. If we can't do that, then if we can't explain it, we can't expect other people to understand it. So we have to be able to explain it. We have to be able to explain it concisely. Once you have your speech, practice your speech. So I encourage you to practice in front of the mirror so you can say it without hesitation, and then look for opportunities to give your speech. It's really funny when I do this exercise with my class because they're all terrified of doing it because it's really awkward. And then suddenly they say, oh, but you know, an opportunity just came up. I was in an elevator with someone, or I was walking up the stairs, or I was sitting in the bus or something. And the opportunity arose. And because they were primed and ready, they could give their speech. And there it was, they'd done it. And after you've done it once, it's so much easier to do it again. But you must have thought through this. What is important about the library that we share? Now, don't just think you do one speech and that's it forever. You want to adapt your speech as necessary. But the whole thing is that you have the nucleus of your speech, that you are confident you're able to give it, and that it is short. Everybody can give you 40 seconds. 15 minutes, not necessarily, but can you convey the essence of the library in your 40 seconds? And the answer is yes, you can, but you need to think about it first. Now, here's one that people always sort of are aghast that I would say, be visible outside the library building. You need to be present. If you're the library director, you need to be highly visible in your community. You need to be at the city council meetings. You need to be at the Chamber of Commerce. You need to be at Rotary and civic organizations. If you're a larger library and have a bigger staff, then it's absolutely fine to designate different staff people to be the Rotary person, to be in the civic organizations. But you need to be visible. And people need to understand that so-and-so is here from the library, that the library is involved in the community. We have been fabulous for an exceptionally long time about waiting for people to come to us, asking us questions, and we give stellar answers to them. We have been less good at moving ourselves out and really insinuating ourselves into the larger community to make people aware what the library is, what a librarian does, and the value of that library to its community. So you need to get out and be visible. Next thing, take a table. Get a table at the farmer's market. Get a table at the county fair. If there's a street party, take a table at the street party, give things away, or sign people up for library cards. Find ways to be there, to be visible, and to bring people in. It's so important. The other thing is, if there's a parade, are you in the parade? Is the library in the parade? If you have a vehicle, great. Have your vehicle right in the parade. If you don't, borrow somebody's truck and stick library stickers on the side, have people doing something in the thing, but have yourselves visible. Because you constantly must remind people that you are the library and that you are essential to their community. So I've just said before, don't wait behind the reference desk. We're very good at that, but it's not helpful really in the modern world. Now, here's the other thing. Go find the folk who are not currently in the library. Do they know you exist? We assume everybody knows where the library is and what it does, but that is a false assumption. A lot of people have no clue. They have never been in a library. I know we find it hard to imagine. There are people walking down the street who have never been in a library in their lives ever. So, do they know you exist? Even if they know you exist, do they know what you offer? Or is a library simply a building with books? They need to know what you offer. The only way they're going to know that is if you tell them. Now, do you have what they need? Are people not in the library because you don't have anything that is meeting their needs? How might you find that out? The only way you're going to find that out is to talk to people. So find out, do you have what they need? If you don't have it, can you get it? The other thing to think about for people not in your library is, are your opening times making it accessible? I've spent almost all of my working life working nights and weekends. It's just how it is. I worked in the arts for many years. I then worked in an education program that essentially dealt with people outside school hours. So I've worked nights and weekends my entire life. Everybody else I know wants to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Well, that's lovely. But if that's not what your community needs, then let's talk about that. Are your opening times accessible? Do people want to come to the library, but it's not open for them? We have to find ways to make our services accessible. And that might be a conversation you need to have. Now, talk about the library everywhere and all the time. I'm going to say this again. Remember, nobody knows what a library really is. Nobody understands what a librarian does, and nobody recognizes the value of a library to its community. You must tell them often and in multiple ways. All the educators know that you must say something at least 3 times before people will remember. Before you leave this presentation, you will all have heard my library assumptions more than 3 times, because I want that to stick in your mind, because it is so important. These assumptions are stopping us doing the things we need to do to make our libraries more vibrant and to help people understand why they need to support their local library. But you need to talk about the library everywhere and all the time. Now, think about everyday advocacy messages. Make sure you have advocacy materials in the library. So I want to ask all the librarians, is there anything in your library explaining what it is? If somebody walked through the door not knowing, how would they know what services are available? How would they know what librarians are trained to do? Is there anything in your library that explains this? And the answer for many libraries is no, we've just assumed, and so there's nothing. Now, you can also advocate for the library on your website. Is there anything on your website that explains what the library is? Is there anything that explains what a librarian does? Is there anything that says we have trained information professionals who are there just to serve you? You can ask us any question and we will find the answer for you. And it doesn't matter how difficult it is, we will find it, because that's what we're trained to do, and it doesn't cost you anything. Is there anything on your website that says that to people? We are just assuming that people know. We must tell them. Now, include library advocacy messages on your social media. Again, we start out with the library assumptions, so we tend not to say the most basic things when we're on social media. But you need to include stories of library success. Did someone start a business with the help of information they got at the library? That is a library success. Did somebody finish their GED because the help they got at the library? That is a story of library success. There are all kinds of things that are stories of library success. We need to tell them as much as possible and encourage other folk to share their library successes as well, or their interactions with the library. The more people who are talking about the library and explaining what the library is, what a librarian does, and the value of the library, then the better off we will be. Now, everyday advocacy messages. Don't forget to invite people to the library. And when I say invite people, I mean stakeholders. So if you have any kind of event at all, invite people to it. If it's the start of the summer reading program, invite the mayor to open the summer reading program. If it is a program you're doing on genealogy, invite someone to come and open it or start it. If you're doing a recognition, the library is 50 years old, 100 years old, invite the city council, invite the Rotary Club, invite people to come, have a ribbon cutting ceremony the next 100 years, invite people to come. Now, notice none of these things are involving much extra time or any expense. Inviting the mayor to come open the summer reading program does not involve any expense other than an email to the mayor's office and 3 extra minutes of time. Now, folks, politicians love photo ops that don't involve them having to go and eat and spend a lot of time. So the 2 or 3 minute photo op is excellent for any elected official. They love doing them. Do not be scared to invite people to do these things. Can you create events? I've said plan small events, recognitions. Do you have a library friend of the year? Fine, let's invite people to that presentation, but let's put it at the beginning of something else or somewhere else so it doesn't have to be by itself. But bring people in for those. An anniversary of the friends. Remember, there's rather a large media company that features a mouse, and for their 50th or whatever birthday, 75th birthday, the birthday wasn't a one-day event. The birthday lasted for 18 months. So don't throw away events. If you have some big event, if you have your 100th year, your 75th year, that is a year. Make the most of it. You can have an event every month. You can have an event every week. But find ways to do small events and bring people in. Circulate emails about library events and achievements. Now, folks, the joy of email is it's not costing you any more money. So sending out an email that says, you know, so-and-so was presenting this about our stellar program at the Kansas Library Association in Topeka. Wonderful. That's, you know, have a picture, have the title of their presentation. That's all it takes. But what are you doing? You are sending something that people are seeing, your name, so-and-so library, they're seeing, oh, they're doing something positive. And then if there's a title there as well, they're thinking, oh, that's interesting. They're talking about AI. Gosh, that library is really on the ball because everybody else I hear is talking about AI. So think about just circulating these events and achievements. You don't actually care if people come, the types of people, the stakeholders, but you care that you're creating that visibility and that awareness of what it is you're doing. Another thing to think of is get a spot on local radio. Our own local radio here, there are weekly spots, there are monthly spots, there are every other weekly spots. Again, it could just be 5 minutes. Most of these now, I think people are doing on the telephone from their home or office. So you don't even have to go anywhere. But again, it's getting that awareness that the library is there and the library is doing things. Can you get a short column in the local newspaper? Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once a month. But again, it's that library as a presence and thinking about you don't have to write enormous amounts. You're writing a paragraph about things that you've already done or are coming. But all of these are little advocacy messages. I'm about to click the wrong thing. Here we go. I want you to think small. I want you to think small. Stalactites and stalagmites, though things that come down, things that mount up, are formed by the repeated action of single drops of water. I want you to think of your advocacy messages like drops of water. You need lots of them over a long period of time. The smaller your advocacy message, the easier it can be to deliver. Try to build tiny advocacy messages into everything you do. And remember, stop assuming that everybody knows. You must tell them. You must tell them, but think small. When we think of crisis advocacy, we're thinking of huge things. We must email every member of the Senate. We must get thousands of people to send emails. And it's not that that is wrong, because it very much has a place. But very often we are doing those crisis advocacy messages with no proper preparation beforehand. Every single tiny advocacy message that you prepare and send is a preparation and makes it the ground more fertile when you have to approach people for more complex or more crisis-oriented issues. You've prepared the ground. People aren't starting from scratch. So the more tiny advocacy messages you can prepare and deliver, the better off you will be. And they don't all have to be unique, folks. They can be repetitive. It's fine. It's fine. But think small. I want you to equip your staff to become everyday advocates. Now, I say this based on experience, not just in Emporia, but in other libraries as well. Ensure your library staff support libraries and professional library standards, such as the Bill of Rights, the right to read, and so on. And do not assume that because they work in your building that they do. First of all, do not assume that everybody knows these exist. And do not assume that even if they know they exist, they understand what they say and why that's important. So make sure that you have actually educated your staff on the Library Bill of Rights, the right to read, the right to view statements. What are our professional things? And this means not just the professional librarians in your staff. It means pages, it means student workers, it means everybody who's working in your building ought to be able to be an advocate for you, but that can only happen if they understand what the library is and why it's important. And you must, in that case, excuse me, educate staff and volunteers, if you have them, to explain the 3 library assumptions. It's not enough for just you to be able to answer those things. Everybody in your building has to be able to say why the library is important. And include the staff and volunteers as appropriate in library communications so they know what is going on. The more you can involve everybody in the building in understanding what's going on and in helping create and distribute those advocacy messages, the better off you will be. The same thing applies to your board. Ensure board members understand. Now, if you're in an academic library, you wouldn't have a board, but you would have upper academic administration. Substitute them for the word board here. Everybody who has authority over the library needs to understand and support professional library standards. They all need to be able to say why the library is important, and then they all need to be included in communications so they understand what's going on. When you look at how, let's take academic libraries, how upper administration sometimes reacts to libraries, it is very often because they do not understand the 3 library assumptions. And so they are not on the same page as everybody in the library, and it's much harder to get them onto the same page in a crisis situation. The more of this work you can do before there is a crisis, the better off you will be, because everybody is prepared ahead of time. So think about not just staff and volunteers, but your board must be educated as well. So what might be your next steps? So the very first step is to start now, today. Do one thing. And one thing could be jot down some notes for a plan. as to what your advocacy plan will be. Do another thing tomorrow. Start making a list of stakeholders. Do another thing the following day. Start thinking about how you would do your speech. It is not important the order in which you do these. What is important is that you start doing something to develop the everyday advocacy habit. Because the more you can ingrain this habit into your everyday practice, the easier it becomes to do, and the more advocacy messages you will actually be spreading. The more advocacy messages you are spreading, the better prepared everyone is going to be when you need to walk in and explain why the library needs a new building, why it's important that we're not censoring materials in the library, or why we need a larger grant to provide this service that will in turn impact the ability of employers to find highly qualified people to hire for their positions. So don't wait. Do something. Remember back to the timing thing? I said 5 minutes. Can you find 5 minutes in your day to start thinking about advocacy? And every single thing you do is moving you closer to a continual state of advocacy-ness, if you like. But this idea that there are multiple small advocacy messages going out in every single thing we do, rather than us simply assuming that everybody knows what a library is, everybody knows what a librarian does, and everybody understands the value of a library to its community. So at that point, I am going to say the ALA, again, has excellent library advocacy resources. There is an advocacy and issues homepage. There is an excellent frontline advocacy toolkit. And then there's also a guide to getting started. And all of these are excellent resources. So that can be also part of how you start this idea of everyday advocacy. But we must get out of this way of thinking that advocacy is something that happens only when a major negative event is looming over us. Advocacy is a wonderful tool. And advocacy can also be a way to help us engage with our communities and bring more people into the library to use our services. So let's start thinking about everyday advocacy and move ourselves forward in library work. I've given you my email here. I am absolutely happy to receive emails and answer questions you may have, but I'm also going to stop sharing my screen at the moment, and I will be happy to answer questions if there are questions in chat, or if people just want to come on live and ask me questions, and I will tell you everything I know. Loud silence was the reply. Oh,
Well, Andrew, I'll say a little something if for the good of the
thank you.
I very much enjoyed your presentation. You make me think of an example of advocacy that really stands out in my mind, and I think fits well with the encouragement you're giving your audience today. I had the pleasure of attending the citizenship ceremony of my son-in-law at the federal courthouse in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a few years ago. The courtroom was completely packed. I mean, I'm sure if the fire marshal had been there, they couldn't have all been in the room because people were just shoulder to shoulder everywhere. I didn't go in the courtroom, but I stood out in the hallway. And one of the things I saw was that one of the librarians from the public library that wasn't but a couple of blocks away had come to the courthouse and put up a table right immediately outside the door of the courtroom. And she had everything there to help people get a library card and to get registered to vote, and not necessarily in that order. And what I was so impressed with, Andrew, was she did not stand behind the table. She stood in front of the table with her eyes looking directly to the people as they came out that room. And, you know, I stood there as long as it happened watching, and there were almost no one walked past her. As many people as were there, they stayed in line to take advantage of what she was doing. And I'm not quite sure they all would have even known what it was. But there was a big sign about the public library, and she was out. She didn't stand behind the table. She stood in front of the table.
Yeah. It's but that's wonderful. And what an excellent example. Thank you for sharing that, of the library getting out and the library going and, you know, registering people to vote, people who are newly eligible, and the library are the people who are registering them to vote. That is an excellent idea. And also that whole idea of I'm not standing behind the table. We are excellent. We are absolutely fabulous as librarians at standing behind reference desks. Nobody is as good as we are at that, and nobody is as good at answering questions. The idea of roving reference, we understand that standing behind the table is not the best way to do things. And so we are getting much better at roving reference and being out from behind the desk, but we still very often tend to get stuck in the library building. And it's thinking about how do we get ourselves out of our building and into other people's buildings, because what we do really isn't limited by a building, or shouldn't be. So that's an excellent example. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Da. That was wonderful. And I just love that image of the library are the first people there to welcome new citizens. That's a powerful statement. That's a really powerful statement that the library is making.
It's a powerful statement about what is the library.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Cassandra, you're dying to say something. Please go right ahead.
Hi, Dr. Smith. Former 868 student, actually. So one thing first, I just wanted to make a comment about, you kind of had a point about library staff and maybe librarians not knowing what other librarians do. And I guess I would say, just as a suggestion, I'm trying to like share stories amongst our libraries, our state library association. So I would just say you could definitely use that as a point for people as well, in terms of advocacy. I guess my question, which turns out maybe is more crisis advocacy, but I guess we're kind of at a point where we have all these different partner groups and it's kind of complicated, but one of our bigger hospitals has been really hard to communicate with. I don't know if you have any suggestions for that kind of context, but or if you, I could send you an email maybe about it, but I would love to, I don't know, talk to you about it sometime.
Sure. Well, a couple of things here. First of all, you and any other student and any other ex-student is always welcome to contact us again. You know, the minute you stop paying tuition, you don't cut yourselves off from us. So we are perfectly happy to do that. I will say that anytime you're having difficulty with communication, I might be inclined to walk my body into somebody's office and sit down and say, or take them coffee, take them a donut, take them something, but get yourself into a room. It is so often much, much easier to deal with these kinds of things if two people are in a room together than if we're firing emails backwards and forwards, or if we're even on a phone call. I'm terrible on the phone. because I'm missing so many of the cues. I really dislike phone calls. I'm much better in person. But I think that would be something, particularly if you think something's going wrong, because I would want to be in a room and say, I'm feeling as if, there's something wrong, that we're not understanding each other. What can I tell you? How can I help you? How can we both make this relationship, move on together? What is it we're not providing for you that we can? So that would probably be more of my thing. Now, I don't interpret that as a crisis in quite so much the same way as someone's about to chop all my funding. Those are the sort of huge crises. But also some of the things you're talking about, I think very often that comes about because maybe we haven't been including people in enough. Long ago, when I worked in the arts, people used to tease me because I was always inviting people to things, knowing full well they weren't going to come. But essentially, I was there saying, for the price of a stamp, I'm reminding them that we exist. I'm making them feel good because I'm inviting them, even although they have no intention of coming. And thirdly, they're now aware of what we're doing. So for one stamp, I got three good things out of it. And so I was still maintaining that relationship, even although it wasn't necessarily, quote, fruitful. But a lot of the time, I think, you want every single interaction doesn't have to have an immediate consequence. And I think that's the part with advocacy. When we're stuck in sort of crisis advocacy, we get into these places where, there's a winner and there's a loser. So you wanted to axe my budget, but we got enough votes and you didn't do it. So we won and you lost. Yeah, okay, so they didn't axe your budget, but now we've had this sort of adversarial thing, and there are now people who are seeing the library in an adversarial mode, and I don't think that's particularly helpful. Now, it's difficult, and particularly now when we're seeing so many things with challenges and concerted challenges, those are adversarial and not through our doing as the library. But I think there are more opportunities for us to be sowing seeds and encouraging little shoots of library understanding to grow, rather than we do nothing and then we want there to be trees of library understanding overnight. And so it's doing this. I'm seeing a comment. Oh, yeah. Well, and Sarah made a comment in the comments about really bad about advocating our electronic resources to faculty and staff. Everybody has Westlaw accounts. It's so expensive. It is frustrating to see they don't use it. Yet our librarians don't put out much info. Well, yeah. How do you handle that communication? That is a slightly different part of advocacy, if you like. When I'm thinking of advocacy, I'm thinking very much in terms of the library as an entity. This is a very specific instance, but it also does sort of exemplify very much our attitude, that we sort of tend to wait for people to come to us rather than we have this fabulous resource. Every one of you has an account. It's costing us an arm and a leg. We need to be telling you about it. So not just telling you about it, I guess we need to be explaining how to use it. That might actually be one where I would think, if it's costing that much money, Sarah, I would have a librarian set up an appointment to go meet with a faculty member and say, I want to share this with you because it's really exciting and I think you could really benefit from this. So whether it's a 30-minute, 15-minute, but actually send someone from the library to their office, log in on their computer and show them how to do it. I think that's how I might be overcoming this. I'm involved in a project at the moment with David Velasquez, our interlibrary loan coordinator, and the thrust of it really is the importance of personal communication in librarianship. And so we've done things where we got turned down for ILL resources through the automatic process, but picking up the phone or sending an email and saying, well, but here's what we really want and here's why we want it, has resulted in almost everything coming to us in a way that if we had just been satisfied with the electronic version, we would be much poorer information-wise. So I think particularly if you're saying this is costing you an arm and a leg, and I'm just reading into your comments, this is costing you an arm and a leg, how much is 15 minutes of a librarian's time worth for you? If you got 3/4 of your faculty using this, would that be worth it? If you got half the faculty using it, would that be worth it? So I might try a very direct approach. I mean, the first thing I might do is, yes, let's try an email approach. Let's just do that. But there's also something totally different about somebody coming up to me and saying, I'm a librarian. I have something for you that I think will really help your work. And I want to show it to you personally at a time that's convenient for you. Is a whole different way of doing it. Now, I don't want to do that for every database, for every kid on a campus. But if you're talking about faculty involvement, about something that is, particularly if you're there thinking, this is vital to what they do. I've got all these faculty who are not using this and should be because it will change their work life. I think I might do the individual approach. And nothing wrong with that. But again, it's moving outside of the library building. And I think that's so important. Now, if your resource is confined to the building, that's a little bit more problematic. But I still might send someone over to the office to say, I'd love for you to come to the library. I want to set up an appointment for you to come and I want to show you this. So find a way to do that personal touch. The other part of this is, I don't know about the rest of you, I am inundated with emails every day. Absolutely inundated. Half of them, I'm barely reading the subject line. I hope the dean's not listening to that. But external emails, I'm barely reading the subject line because I simply don't have time. So anytime someone will take the time to do something in person, that speaks volumes, not just about them, it also speaks volumes about what they represent. So if I'm representing the library, if I'm going to invest time in you, then my goodness, I'm going to listen. So that might be an approach I would consider is in those kinds of cases. Just a thought, may or may not work, but I might try it and see.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Alex.
Hey, great presentation, by the way. And I have a lot of thoughts because I worked at the public library where you were the board member and I did a lot of that outreach. To your thing about the personal touch, I absolutely agree. And I think we talked about this when Bob and I did our presentation in the spring about outreach, similar idea about that personal touch. Sometimes it's really good to just get out of the library and just meet that person in face to face. Just take that opportunity. Like if you can, hey, you go to an event, that your stakeholders are going to be at, just go there and just have the opportunity to talk to them for a few seconds or a few minutes, or you need to run something, offer to do it yourself. Say, hey, you know what, I'll bring that over to you. And that just gives you an opportunity to touch base with them just for a little bit. The other thing, or I guess the question I have is, okay, so COVID, right? That kind of brought this awareness of, hey, what do we do? No one knows what the library is doing afterwards. The idea of advocacy and outreach, that became like the theme of how to reconnect with people after the pandemic. So that's when I started. So to me, that's a bit of crisis, right? It's kind of like both like this is actually crisis advocacy because like you just realized that when we shut down, people didn't know what the library was doing anymore, or just even doing the pickups and things. And that was really what I was doing that first year of outreach. So have you seen a difference since then in terms of how libraries are advocating for themselves? Are they continued that trend of focusing on advocacy since then? Or is it kind of going back to the way before of not doing a whole lot of advocacy?
It's not that we're not doing any, well, you know, there's advocacy and there's outreach.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be two sides of the same coin, but I think they're slightly different.
Yes, I agree.
And so for me, the advocacy is really concentrating on the awareness of what the library is. The outreach is a little bit more trying to bring people in or promoting specific services. And it's not that, you know, and then there's not a solid line between the two.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, library advocacy is much more addressing the library assumptions, because
Okay.
I think that's where the biggest problem is. And as I said, I sat on Friday afternoon, actually, with, now, these are all college-educated people, you know, very intelligent, successful careers, and a lot of them were asking questions that absolutely let me know that their idea of the library was a building with books. And
Right.
it's not that that's wrong. Sure, a library is a building with books, but that's not what a library is. You know, a library is an institution that brings people and information together. It's the people and information that are important coming together. That's the essence of librarianship, people, information together. It is not a building. That is not the essence of librarianship. It's not a building, it's people and information. And so trying to help people understand, yes, everything's different in that there's all this technology. Yes, we're doing things differently. But at our core, we are doing what we have always done, which is bringing people and information together. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And oh, gosh, I hadn't thought of it. I just thought that because everything, you know, everything's online and all these AI tools and everything, the library will just somehow, you know, dissolve into a little puddle in the ground. You think, no. And that's why I also emphasized, you know, what does a librarian do? And part of what a librarian does is also that emphasis on accurate and unbiased information. And, you know, goodness knows we need accurate and unbiased information these days because we are now bombarded, and everybody is bombarded by inaccurate and biased information from all sides. So this idea that there are people who are not doing that, that is not what they're here to do. They are here to get you accurate and unbiased information. That ought to be a revelation. Now, it is a revelation because most people don't know that, as that's what a librarian does.
Right.
And they don't understand that we're trained to do that. So that, to my mind, is where the benefit of advocacy really comes in, is that we're trying to educate people in the three library, assumptions. And then outreach is bringing people in, trying to promote specific programs, specific resources, specific other things. But it's not, you know, and it's not either or. It's very much both and. And a single visit. So I was suggesting to Sarah, send some librarians into the faculty offices. I think that is both outreach and advocacy, because on the one hand, I'm trying to overcome some of the assumptions. At the same time, I'm trying to promote a specific product or service. So
Yeah.
we think something can be both outreach and advocacy at the same time. But what I think is important is that we focus on adding advocacy messages to every single thing we do, because it's like insurance. Nobody needs flood insurance until the water is coming over your doorstep, at which point it is essential, but it is too late to buy it. It's very much the same. Nobody needs library advocacy until someone is threatening to cut off your funding or abolish the library or do whatever people want to do, because they've had no exposure to this understanding of who we are, what we're doing, and why. And the other thing is, and how important that is to, for example, the American political process. It is found, the whole idea of people with individual responsibility is foundational to any democracy. So it's essential. Take that away, and then you're diminishing your democracy, you're diminishing your political process. And that starts becoming very dangerous. There we are. There's your warning for the week. There we are. But
Well, thank you.
Alex, you are absolutely spot on, I think, with what you're saying.
Yep.
We're over time. I'm terribly sorry. If there's a final question, I'm happy to entertain it. But if not, I thank everybody for coming and for listening. And all I would say is, don't just listen and think, oh yeah, that was interesting. Start your library advocacy. And I meant to ask Cassandra if she was giving her speech, since she had been in the advocacy class, but we'll maybe save that for a later time. But anyway, thank you everybody for coming.